Today, I wanted to introduce our guest. First, I will tell you who I am. I am Elen Stellian, the Midlife Empowerment Coach, and I am thrilled to be joined by Patty Bonsera. Patty is a certified financial education instructor. She is a former securities trader who became a financial wellness advisor to support women 40 plus. So in an industry built for men, she founded Fearless Girl Financial as a better way to help midlife women feel confident and beautiful about their finances and to celebrate midlife with soulful abundance. Love that. She will coach you, teach you, and celebrate with you every step of the way. So Patty, welcome. I cannot wait to hear your 2 essential foundations for financial wellness. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Elaine, for having me. And for all of you watching, just thank you for joining us this morning. I'm super excited to be here and glad that you're able to join us. And so, when we talk about financial wellness, especially for women and women in midlife, perhaps you are someone, you've maybe raised a family, maybe you've been through some major life events, and you're kind of just like asking, this whole midlife thing is like, okay, well, what's next, right? And for most of us, we are going to, about 80% of us are actually going to wind up being financially responsible for our own finances at some point in our lives. And that's either due to divorce or widowhood or, any kind of unexpected event like that. And so what Elaine was talking about too is, yes, this is a very masculine industry. And so my mission is to make it less masculine so that you really feel as beautiful and confident about your finances in the same way you do after you have an afternoon at a spa or a massage, or any of those really great self-confident type of things that you do for self-care. Because for us as women, when we feel better about ourselves, and our self-care, and then we feel so much better equipped to handle our finances. And then it just all intertwines and feeds on each other, right? However, one of the things that I've discovered is, and you'll see too, like so many people just go straight to the budgets, right? And that's where we get stuck. Because quite honestly, like, I don't know about you, but when I hear the word budget, I cringe, right? Like, who wants to just break out a spreadsheet? And so I don't call it a budget. I call it a soulful spending plan, because your life and your whatever it is that you want to do from now until your later years, this is your time. This is your time to rediscover yourself, to reinvent yourself, and your finances are just a huge part of that. And so this is not so much about building wealth just for wealth's sake. This is about making sure that you feel empowered and beautiful and confident about your finances so that when you're 80 and 90 years old, we are not dependent upon family or the government or anyone else to take care of our financial safety and security. So there are 2 important things that we're going to talk about today that really are the foundation before you even get to the spending plans, because it's all about your story first and then the numbers, because the numbers then actually support your story. So the 2 things that we're going to talk about today is what I like to call nourishing net worth, right? So when you nourish your soul, you nourish your self-care. And when we bring that over into personal finance, it's a net worth statement. But this net worth statement is more than just numbers on a spreadsheet, right? It really is a snapshot in time of your assets, what you own versus and minus your liabilities, which are things that you owe. And to break it down even simpler, assets can be divided into 3 major categories. They're like your cash and cash equivalents, your invested, and those are things like what you have in your savings account, in your bank account, if you have any money market type accounts, anything like a cash equivalent is something that can easily be converted into cash. Then the next part of your assets is your invested assets. So these are things like retirement accounts, any other investment accounts that you may have, but it also includes things like real estate, Precious metals are invested assets. Mutual funds, if you own individual stocks, individual bonds, those are also invested assets. Another category, which is the last major category that many people probably don't think about, these are your personal use assets. And so these are things like your automobile, jewelry, furnishing, clothes, and any of your other personal effects. Those are actually assets, because an asset is really something that you can convert to cash, right? So that's kind of like on the left side of the piece of paper. And one of the things that we do is we make it pretty, right? So this is more than just breaking out the spreadsheet. This is making you feel like you're going to get, take a nice long bath, get into a beautiful robe, comfy robe, favorite pair of slippers, get a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, whatever your favorite beverage is, and then we're going to work on this, right? So the other piece of that are your liabilities, and liabilities are actually categorized in two ways. These are the things that you owe. So we have short-term liabilities and we have long-term liabilities. Short-term liabilities, these are things that are due within 1 year. So anything that's like a promissory note or a very short-term type of loan, anything that is, has a maturity date, I guess, or a due date within 1 year, that is a short-term liability. A long-term liability are liabilities and things that are due longer than 1 year. So that would include things like your mortgage or an auto loan. Student loans would be considered a long-term liability. Any type of other personal loan would be considered a long-term liability. But notice how we don't include things like consumer debt. Consumer debt is, well, I shouldn't say we don't include it. We do include it because it really just kind of depends on, how many different credit cards maybe you have, when are they maybe due, how long do you think it might take to pay them off? And it just kind of depends on where you are. So they can be either short or long-term, depending on what your particular situation is. So that is really the essential of a net worth statement, but we like to call it nourishing net worth. And because financial wellness, all of this is really, it's 80% soul care and self-care and 20% math, right? Because if it was only about the math, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, right? Many women would be in a very different financial space if it was only about the math. And so that's why I want you to really focus more on your self-care and your nourishment. And then we bring in the math, and then we bring in the financial piece. So the other part to that, and we call them essential foundations, or I like to call them fresh start foundations, because think about midlife as your fresh start. It really is an opportunity. So the other piece of that is we call it confident cash flow, right? So cash flow is what's coming in and out of your bank account every single month. And I like to call it confident cash flow because I want you to feel absolutely confident knowing, what those numbers are. Because without knowing what those numbers are first, it's really very difficult to make the transition to go to a spending plan. So then, while the net worth statement is really a snapshot in time of your assets and your liabilities, the cash flow statement, that's the inflows and outflows during a specific period of time. And usually that's month to month. And so your cash flow really can be divided into two different types, fixed and variable. And fixed is pretty self-explanatory. That's like, if you're on a fixed salary, if you're on any type of fixed income, that's a fixed inflow. Variable is like, say, for example, if you're working on a base salary plus commission, or if you're someone who works on commission only, or for many of us who are in our own businesses, yes, that would be variable inflows because, your client base or whatever products or services that you sell perhaps vary from month to month. So those are your fixed and your variable inflows. Your outflows, that's money that's going out every single month. again, those can be divided into, we look at 3 different categories for that. We have fixed outflows. Those are examples of those are going to be like your rent, your mortgage, an auto loan, an auto lease, if you lease your car, internet cable, is, well, it depends. Like some internet cable will give you just a fixed dollar amount for every single month. Some of them are variable. It really just kind of depends on your internet company. Your phone bill is usually a fixed outflow depending on who your cell phone service is. Variable outflows are going to be things like groceries, clothing, travel, which unfortunately many of us are not doing right now, and things like entertainment. Anything that does not have a specific dollar amount every single month that's going out is a variable outflow. And lastly, the last category into that is taxes. Many people a lot of times we don't include taxes because we forget about them, because if you are employed, it just comes right out of your paycheck every month or every 2 weeks, depending on how often you get paid. But yes, that is definitely an outflow, because that's money that you're not getting, that's coming in, that's going to the government. So your taxes are like your federal, state, Social Security, Medicare, income tax, anything that's taxed that's not an inflow to you, yes, is part of your outflows. So again, it's super simple, where gathering some of this information at first may seem a little overwhelming, depending on, how engaged you've been in your finances. And I would just encourage you, if you are married and if you haven't been, part of the financial conversation, just sit down and make a financial date with your spouse. Get some favorite snacks. Get a bottle of, if you want a bottle of wine or something non-alcoholic, or, some cappuccino or something like that. And just really start that conversation where, getting those things organized, especially now, is a really great time to do that, because it's still the beginning of the year for the most part. I mean, I know it's almost March, but we're still in the beginning of the year. So now is a really great time to get those things organized and to really kind of figure out, what you really have. And then once you have all those documents together and gathered, and that also includes like insurance papers, all of those important documents, then you can start looking and say, okay, now we're going to create this nourishing net worth statement, because we really need to know where we are first before we can move forward. And we're going to create this confident cash flow statement, because now once we do that, now we can create a soulful spending plan based on whatever it is that your goals and dreams are. Maybe it's paying off debt, maybe it's paying off any student loans. Maybe you may still have students that are going through college, anything along those lines that, we talk about designing your life plan first and then designing your financial plan, because your financial plan supports your life. It's your life on your terms, your goals, your dreams, your aspirations. So those are really the 2 essential foundations for knowing where you're starting from. And I have a couple of bonus things I'd like to talk about, if that's okay. One of the things that many people don't really are maybe not even aware of are different financial ratios. And those financial ratios are used by mortgage lenders, by auto lenders, by insurance companies, by some of those companies to determine your eligibility and your risk as far as paying some of those things back. So for example, the first is consumer debt ratio. And consumer debt ratio is really, it's super simple. It's your monthly consumer debt payments divided by your monthly net income. So once you finish with your nourishing net worth statement and your confident cash flow statement, you'll be able to calculate these ratios yourself, actually. And so what we're looking at is your consumer debt ratio should be about 20% or less of your net monthly income. And so that's the first one. The second one is your housing cost ratio. And your housing cost ratio is pretty self-explanatory. That's your monthly housing cost, but it does not include utilities because utilities are variable. So this is really just your mortgage payment or your rent payment if you don't own a home. And what you do to calculate your housing cost ratio is you take your whatever that number is and you divide it by your monthly gross income, not your net, but your gross income. That's gross income before taxes or anything else that goes out. That should be about 28% or less of your gross monthly income. And then the last one, which is pretty important for a lot of lenders that they look at, is your total debt ratio. And a lot of this too also plays into your credit score. Now, credit scores are kind of a totally separate topic that we just don't have time for, not going to get into today. But your total debt ratio, that is where you take your total monthly debt. That's all your monthly debt divided by your monthly gross income. And that ratio should be about 36% or less of your monthly gross income. Now, if you are, and I just want to emphasize too, and just encourage you that if you're above those numbers and if you're not within those percentages, I don't want you to feel like you've done something wrong. But this gives you a benchmark to kind of aim for, so that this way, once you start to look at your net worth and your cash flow and your spending plans, then you probably would want to look at these ratios maybe about once a year, just so that you get a better idea of where you stand in case you're looking to buy a second home or looking to buy your first home or anything along those lines. And that gives you a better idea of what you're going into when it's time to apply for those loans. So that is really, that's the basics and that's the essentials. And so thank you, Elaine, for allowing me to share.
Oh, wow. You are such a natural teacher and you make things so much simpler than they are. I know a lot of us can be a little overwhelmed, as you said, with all the financial terminology, and it can be a little much. And sometimes I feel like it's easier to just put the blinders on, especially if we've got somebody else handling it, whether it's our spouse or somebody else, and just, say, okay, I'm just going to let them deal with it. And there's a lot of fear around that. But I think your message is so spot on that so many of us are already or are going to end up needing to be the primary person managing our finances. So if we're not doing it now, there is a time that's going to come when we will in all likelihood, to be the ones doing it. So it sounds like educating yourself now rather than waiting for, let's say your husband passes away and now you have no idea and you're trying to scrounge around, figure out what's what. I'm sure you've had scenarios where, well, I don't know the password to this or the whatever, and it's overwhelming. And on top of that, you're dealing with grief, you're a major loss and you're trying to figure this stuff out. Not the right time. It sounds like this is like now is the right time for this.
It is. And you make such a great point, because it is easy to put the blinders on. And, I've had clients and I've talked with other women who, and I want to emphasize too, and this is not about, well, I don't have a college degree, so I don't understand this. This has nothing to do with your education status or your economic status. I mean, I've talked to women who have PhDs, and I've also talked to women who don't have a college degree. And that's not the issue here. The issue is this is a very masculine industry, and we need to make it more approachable for women. Because for women and men are wired so differently when it comes to finances. For us, financial security and knowing that we can take care of ourselves and that we're not going to have to depend on someone else. That is our safety. Then that is our security. And because it's not just about the money, it's about the emotions and all of that, and that self-care and that self-worth that all tie in together. So I just want to encourage, everyone that, it doesn't matter where you're starting. We just start.
Yeah. One step at a time. I mean, it's not, I'll admit something. I have an MBA, and so you would think, I've taken finance classes. It's very different also learning at finance versus personal finance. They don't teach you that in an MBA, so it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to me at all. And I have a marketing degree for my MBA for a reason, but and oftentimes it's just easier to not deal with it because it's this uncomfortable. And I love how you use different wording to help us feel, give it a feminine vibe. I love the nourishing net worth, the confident cash flow, the soulful spending plan. I mean, let's embrace it. Let's make it our own, because we've had men put wording on this that feels hard and not very easy to understand, and not tapping into emotion at all. And I think the words you're using are really capturing the emotion that really is a driver here, not just the dollars and cents.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, it isn't just about the dollars and cents. So yeah, and that you make a really great point that, and it's interesting too, because I came from, wealth management. I mean, I was a securities trader for 20 plus years where, I had all the licenses and all of that. But that is so different, than personal finance. That's just trading, securities, and that was great. And I loved it. It was a wonderful part of my career journey. But, going through a lot of my own personal financial upheaval, and confiding into close girlfriends, that's when I really realized that, oh my gosh, like these are close girlfriends that don't feel like they have someone to talk to. And I know that there are other women out there too that feel like, oh gosh, they don't feel like they can approach a financial advisor because they're either going to be sold, an insurance policy or some type of product. And those are important, don't get me wrong, but that's not why many women are seeking out financial advice. They just need to know that they're going to be okay. And they just want to know that they're going to be okay. And so,
yeah, and not to let fear be the driver here. If you want to feel okay, putting the blinders on is probably not the way you're gonna. It's still gonna. The fear is still gonna sit there. You may be tamping it down. You may be putting deep inside, but it's still there. As opposed to get yourself educated, you might find out you're in pretty good shape, or if not, you can do something about it. So
and I think too, to not feel judged. We don't want to feel judged, for not understanding, what all of these things are and how all these pieces and all these financial pieces fit together. No one, especially for women, and I think too, for many women who, one of the, sorry, I don't mean to be tripping over my words, but one of the statistics is like for women who became a widow or an unexpected widow, who have let their spouses handle all those finances, they have no idea what questions to even ask that financial advisor, because they don't know what they even had. And that hurts me to see, because I want every woman, and especially in midlife, and that's why I talk to women in midlife, because the reality is we're not in our 20s anymore, right? And even though this is a wonderful time and opportunity to rediscover and reinvent ourselves, the reality is we're not in our 20s. We don't have another 50 years or so to make up for, some of those things that happened in the past. So that's why it's important to redefine this time for you and what you want. And yes, of course, finances play a part of that, but we have to change this narrative of building wealth for wealth's sake, and creating financial safety and security based on what you want it to look like.
Yeah, and that's why I love the fact that you look at it from the perspective of how can your financial situation support your life plan?
Right,
What
exactly.
that's the driver. It's not just let's just accumulate money or let's just,
Right,
make sure you can pay the bills. That's what do you really want out of this next phase of your life? And
exactly.
how does your financial situation support that, or how can it better support it?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You word that beautifully. Thank you.
How do you work with your clients? Like a woman comes to you and like, what is usually the situation where you step in or you're called upon for your help, and how do you help?
Sure. So that's a great question. So we have basically there's three ways that a woman can work with me. So we have what's called our it's called Balanced Fresh Start program, which is part of the Fresh Start Foundations, and that's where that's like the starting point if you're looking at this from from the financial perspective. The other piece to that is I also do money mindset coaching. So for a lot of women who have been through financial trauma or financial situations or other situations that have affected their financial mindset, we work on that as well. And then the other piece is affordable estate planning. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I do not give estate planning or tax advice, but I have partnered with a law firm to be able to offer very affordable estate planning for women who just need to put all those essential documents together. And so what happens is on my website, basically, you can go to fearlessgirlfinancial.com and there are the three menu items there. You request to get together, and I do have like just a short questionnaire so I get to know your situation a little bit better, and then we get on a 30-minute free call. It's kind of a getting to know you session, and we just look at that and decide, okay, what is, are we a good fit to work together, and where is it that's the best place for you to start?
And so if somebody's going to work with you and they're not looking for the estate planning piece, is
Mhm.
the way to work with you either on the money mindset coaching or what the first program you mentioned, like what does
Yes,
that
it's,
entail?
it's called Fresh Start Foundations. It's kind of a combination of financial planning and financial coaching.
Got you. Okay, so that's where and it's a group format,
No, that's
or is it an
one-on-one.
individual?
Yeah, that for now, that
Okay,
is
perfect.
one-on-one. Yes.
Okay, so one-on-one, and then that's where you can really delve into and help a woman figure out sort of how do I get started? Okay, you've got me, you've convinced me, I need to get savvy on this stuff, and you can help somebody sort of know where to look and how to look at finances, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we start with this
Okay,
foundation, essentially. We start with, making sure that she's got her foundation in place first, and then we move forward from there.
perfect. Okay. And I know you have a free gift for our viewers today. So tell us a little bit more about this financial wellness guide for women 40
Yeah.
plus.
So the financial wellness guide really is, yes, totally free. And that is really to help you start that process of really kind of getting engaged in the financial piece and also the mindset piece too. And so there are 6 essential things that are in that really kind of really start that little bit of a process, like knowing your money story. Like everybody, we all have a money story. What is your money story? And then there's also some checklists in there too. And those checklists are just some of the basics of, so that you kind of get an idea, like, I don't want to say it's a questionnaire, but it's a totally non-judgmental piece where, do you know like how much is coming in? And it doesn't have to be to the penny. How are some of the different things that you feel when you experience certain financial situations? So it goes into some of those things as well. And it does talk about estate planning, which I feel is so super important. Whether it be a will or trusts or things like that, but it does go and talk a little bit about estate planning. But it really is a good piece to give you just kind of a baseline to some of the things that you need to start engaging in.
I love this. And everything you're talking about, it just dovetails so well with my mission to empower women. I mean, that's exactly what you're doing. It's so, so important. So thank you again for sharing all of your expertise with us today. And certainly I'm going to put your website and the free guide, the link to the free guide in the comments, and hope everybody will go and check it out and grab your guide. It sounds like an amazing gift. So thank you for your generosity.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and everybody, if you enjoy these videos, please continue watching for more. They'll be coming weekly. And until then, be well and stay safe, everybody. And thank you.
Thank you so much.